So one way to think about contemporary fiction, it's actually conversation between places and pressures. It's about cities and histories, myth and memory, realism and fantasy and speculation and a lot more. So today, these three different writers, they come from different locations, but something that I noticed about your books are the cities or the places that you've lived in, they have a very important or a very prominent place in your novels. So let's start off with that, I think, That is each one of you, whether it is Mumbai, whether it is Kolkata, or that little village in Kerala, all of you have depicted it in a very beautiful way. So let's start with you, Murzban, about the city as a character in your writing.
Yeah, thanks, Smrithi. So, when I started writing, which was in 2001, I wrote for a couple of years. And my entire social life changed. I started spending a lot of time at bookstores, and a certain sense of disenchantment set in. And I asked myself this hard-nosed question that why do you need another writer, and why do you need a Bombay-based writer? Because Suketu Mehta had written, Suketu's book was Expected Maximum City. Rohinton had done Fine Balance, and quite a few of the big Bombay books were written. Yeah. So I had a certain sense of disenchantment, and before that I was in advertising, so it was a jet set profession. So I kind of looked around and I thought that, if I had to really understand my city, I had to kind of understand the other half of the city. And I had no business writing unless I had a holistic idea of India. So I started traveling to the villages of India and spending time with villagers and understanding certain migration patterns into the city.
Okay.
And that's when I actually realized that there are three kinds of people in Mumbai. They are the haves, the have-nots, and there's a worse category called the know-nots, people who didn't know how the other half lived. And that's when I actually found my purpose. So when I came back, I started working with migrant communities. I started understanding the issues that kind of affected them, So, and then so there were dhobis, Victoria walas, Malish walas, Belpuri walas, street hawkers. And I started figuring out what were the issues that affected them. And slowly I took it across the socio-economic spectrum so that I could weave a whole tapestry that was Mumbai. Yeah. And then even issues about like the pastry culture, employees in the public sector, what were the issues? So I kind of write from very character-based, issue-based fiction. So in that sense, I think I see myself as a chronicler of the city. So that was so I worked on my first collection, which was Breathless in Bombay for 5 years. Eventually placed with her US house. And I published several stories and anthologies overseas with university journals, some won awards, through some agents. And oh, I see. Okay, sorry. So so the city became a character. It started speaking back to me, and I could put my own relationship with the city in perspective. That what did the city mean to me? Is it a city that you love to hate, or is it a city that you hate to love? So I could clear up that ambivalence in my own head, yeah. And then years later, of course, I decided to work a companion piece, which is Muses over Mumbai, because the city itself had evolved by then. There were a lot of issues. Mumbai's skyline was changing. Its entire personality was changing. We had been in the throes of a serious terror attacks, the 27/11 terror attacks, when I actually woke up and realized the kind of intense love I had for Mumbai. So I wrote a piece called The Conversations with a Terrorist, which actually asked the last terrorist that what did you get out of doing this to us, And when the pain got too much, I went into poetry from prose. So I could actually understand my relationship with the city and demystify it for my audience. Yeah.
Wow. Over to you. I'm just skipping because we went from one city, now we're going to a little village in Kerala. So over to you, Ponnu.
Yeah, thanks. And then we'll go back to the city,
yes.
I guess. So just to give a background, I don't know how many people have read the book, The Remnants of Rebellion. So this book is inspired by a real-life incident from my grandfather's life when he was the superintendent of a rubber estate in Kerala. So the sense of place is very important in the story. Rather places. It's not. So I have fictionalized that story that happened in real life, and I've used the same place in the book, but I've changed the name of the place. So the place that I've mentioned in the book is a fictional village called Putulur. It is an estate, and So that is where Isho worked as the superintendent. And so that is one of the timelines that is there in the book. And the other timeline that I follow is his granddaughter's timeline, Eliama. And she goes back to this village, to the estate house, which she inherits. And it's a quaint little place. I've been there. I've changed the name, though. And so that, and the estate house, and the old British mansion built like a dak bungalow, all these things are there in the book. And so that sense of place is very important. The rubber estates, the tapping, the workers getting up early in the morning to tap the trees, and so it's very, very crucial to the book. But that's not the only place I've mentioned in the book. There is another place which is very crucial to the history of the Syrian Christian community called Niranam. So Niranam is one of the places that the character lives in. And at Niranam, I don't know if people know about this. It's supposed to be, according to the legends, it's supposed to be one of the 7.5 churches that St. Thomas built. That is the story, obviously. And so Niranam is also mentioned in the book. So this story, it's set in a rubber estate. It also talks about Niranam. But it's set in a Syrian Christian Malayali household. So it talks about the history of that community as well. So Niranam is a very important part of the story as well. So I think, people say the place becomes a character in the story. It's maybe just a trope, but it's not. For me, it was very crucial to the storytelling.
Okay, so over to you now, right from a village again to a city. Kolkata we have. Yes, Indra.
Thank you for the question. So this book, The Last Dragoners of Beaubazar, which is my latest book, I wrote it at the peak of the pandemic. So it was under lockdown, and in a sense, there was this longing for the city that I had lived in all my life and grew up in. And there was the sense that we had all lost the cities and the places that we live in because we were all shut off. Well, not everyone. Again, if you're talking about the have-nots, they were literally keeping us alive by, going around and doing everything for us. And but so, I felt this nostalgia for a city that I was living in, that is present. But this year, it started out from a dream that I had about a grandmother, not my real grandmother, showing me a plant, and there was a seed pod in the plant, and she opened the seed pod, and it turned out to be the wings of a little dragon, a little baby dragon in the tree. And I remember being I was so ecstatically happy in the dream because it's just dragons are real. How do people not know about this? And when I woke up again, there was this sense of intense loss that I had lost this reality. But so when I started writing this book, it was for a contract. A publisher invited me to write a book for them, and I could write about anything. So I took this image from this dream, and then I think the sense of loss I felt for Kolkata, even though I was living in it at the time, came into that, and I situated this image within Kolkata. And it's about a family of refugees from another reality who are living in Kolkata. So it's set the city is a very important part of it. But a lot of it also, it's at the time, at the peak of the pandemic, at that time there was this whole intense racism happening against the Chinese diaspora in Kolkata, and there were these boycotts of these restaurants that was so important to the city. Chinese, Indian, yes. Kolkata Chinese. It's a very unique cuisine, and a syncretic cuisine. And I wanted to capture that syncretism that exists. Kolkata was a port city, and it was extremely multicultural at one. And we had various diaspora populations: Armenian, Jewish, Christian, Anglo-Indian. Anglo-Indian, not exactly diaspora, but yeah, all these enclaves and different populations, and now they're all dying out because everyone's leaving. And so I wanted to capture that multiculturalism, and which is why I focused on the neighborhood that is one of the Chinatowns of Kolkata, Tireti Bazaar, in central and north Calcutta. So, and you know, I've gone with my friends there so often. We eat at the Chinese restaurants there, and so it's a beautiful, beautiful part of the city, though very incredibly crowded and noisy and intense. But if you go on a weekend, on a Sunday, it's lovely. You can see all the old buildings, and you know, there's also this sense of that history vanishing slowly from Kolkata, and it's so known for that. But you know, you have big business coming in. You have these multicultural populations are leaving, and these big businesses are coming in instead. So it's a very, very poor exchange. You know, we've got these beautiful old buildings being bulldozed and replaced with condos, ugly, ugly condos for rich people. And you see this everywhere. And you see this in so many cities. You know, it's a universal thing that's happening. So I wanted to capture, and this book is set in the 90s and early 2000s. So it's a very different Kolkata, and that I grew up in. You know, it's set in the time that I grew up in as a teenager in the city. So I wanted to capture that. It is a coming of age story. I mean, obviously the character is not me, but I wanted to capture the feeling of growing up in the city, and also bring in the multiculturalism of it.
Wow. So yeah, that's what's happening with all the three books, the importance of the places. But now I think, you know, we should spend a few minutes to actually read excerpts from the book,
Sorry,
each of you. Yes, please.
I just want to add something to what Indra just said, that, you know, cuisine is such an important definer of place, you know. So one of the aspects which I got taken up with, since I write a lot of issue-based fiction, is this whole vegetarian, non-vegetarian divide which was seeping into Mumbai society. You know, it was becoming a very serious sort of cultural divide here. So this one story in Museum of Mumbai, I start off with that, where actually there is a housing society, and two ladies have a feud on the basis of this, you know. And I use the metaphor of a pigeon. It's called ruffled feathers. So a pigeon gets into a shaft, and they can't dislodge it. So I use this metaphor of ruffled feathers to show how petty quarrels emerge, and the vegetarian non-vegetarian divide actually escalates into a war which has other hidden motivations behind it, you know. So I think food is a really important part to tackle it, even in terms of fiction.
Very much so. I mean, cuisine. This book also focuses on the cuisine of this kind of diaspora from another reality. And I wanted to imagine what it might feel like to have a cuisine that is from another world but developed within Kolkata.
It's
you know,
part
so
of Kolkata's iconic life.
So which is, and the family lives in Chinatown. So the main character has a relationship with the Chinese diaspora, and the building that they live in is rented out to a Chinese family who owns a Chinese restaurant. So it's there's a connection there as well. But yeah, cuisine so important, and this was somewhat influenced by anime as well, which I was interested in how they depict food with such care. You know, it's such an important part of many anime films, where they kind of lovingly depict the preparation of food and the resources that go into it. And I wanted to also do that in a literary fashion.
And seeing your enthusiasm, I realized that fiction is such a sensory experience.
Yes.
I mean, you know, Indra here is so fired up talking about Chinese cuisine, and, you know, likewise.
And even in Ponnu's, we have fish curry coming in.
Yeah,
the smell of fish curry.
In the book, the food is important. The Syrian Christian Malayali cuisine is very unique. But it's not just the food, it's about how the food is eaten and in what vessel it was served, because of the caste politics. So that is actually one of the turning points in the book, the way the food was served. So the upper caste wouldn't eat in the same plates as the outcasts, or the lowered caste. I have to say lowered, you know. They were lowered. And in fact, there is one part, I can't give away the story, you'll have to read it, but it's the food and how it was eaten, in what, was it on a banana leaf? You know, I've heard stories about how people were given kanni, or the gruel, rice gruel, made into a little cone using a banana leaf dug into the soil, because otherwise it would be polluting the kitchen. So actually those things are explored, food and how they were eaten as well. Yeah.
Yes, so we shifted from cities to food and cuisine, but I think food is also a love language. It's something through which we convey so much. That's why sometimes we say, chalo, chai pe chalo. We had so much of tea and coffee together, isn't it, while we were bonding. So coming back to the book and the experience, I think, for all of them sitting here, we should have each of you reading a little bit, excerpts from your book so that we can delve into the next questions. So shall we start with you, Murzban?
Okay. So I'm going to read from my novel. It's called Waiting for Jonathan Koshi. And I'll give you a little background on this. What happened was in 2008, I released my first book, Breathless in Bombay. And it did very well for itself. It was shortlisted for the Commonwealth Writers' Prize. The Guardian rated it as among the 10 best Mumbai books ever. And I thought, well, I've done my job, all good, now get back to writing. So I plunged into this very dark novel which I was working on, The Transgenders of Mumbai. And when I get a call from a journalist at one of the publications saying that she wanted to speak to me about a criminal complaint against my book. So apparently some right-winger representing a regional right-wing party had filed a criminal complaint against my book, saying that I'm trying to create communal disharmony. It was under a very serious section, 153B, which was liable for, it's a non-bailable offense, and I was liable for 3 years of imprisonment. Anyway, I don't want to get into that. It was an ordeal, it was a saga. I went through it for 3 years. But while I was facing my cases in the courtrooms of India, I thought I didn't need to work on a dark novel, which takes me into a darker space. So I said, let me create a light, trippy novel where I can satirize things about India, and which keeps me in a pleasant frame of mind. So I thought I'd create a character-driven novel called Waiting for Jonathan Koshi. Now, the interesting thing was that since I want to satirize India and I wanted to raise two questions. One is, how do you define success? Because on one level, I thought I was very successful. I'd created a successful book. And the next moment, life had upstaged me. So I wanted to answer that question, that how do you define success? It's really important for today's generation, for any generation, in fact. Sure. And the second thing was that, can you really understand India? What is India really? Is it an enigma? What is it? And honestly, guys, I didn't know what India was till I spent day after day in the courtrooms of India. But fortunately, the person who kept me entertained was this larger-than-life character called Jonathan, a complete figment of my imagination. And why a Malayali?
I was just coming to that.
Because I had an option. Because, Malayalis have an inherent sense of rebellion. They are very uncompromising in terms of their ideology, in terms of look at this lady nodding away with approval. And I thought either a Parsi, which is what I am, or a Malayali. I didn't want to do a Parsi, it's home territory. And I love Malayalis. I have a lot of respect for them. I've hung out a lot of journalists in Mumbai are Malayalis. So they are very sort of intellectual, intelligent, outspoken, entrepreneurial, and yet they are hippies at heart. They really don't give a damn for success or flamboyance, Also, they have this crazy creative streak in them, which makes them very interesting. And so I like the whole thing about a Malayali coming to Mumbai. He's not a Kerala Malayali, he's a Mumbai Malayali. So he comes to Mumbai to give his ideas credibility, and then things don't work out for him because he refuses to compromise, right? He's not going to sell his soul. So things don't work out for him, he rushes back to Kerala. So the whole idea was that, can I create a character who's so larger than life that where he stands becomes a story? And for him, life becomes a plot. With that, I'm going to give you a small flavor of the book.
With the short introduction that you've given, I think after this we'll be heading to the bookstore to get this book and get the whole essence of it. So
I hope so. Books could do with that kind of support, yeah. Jonathan had a routine. Every few years, he'd land up in Mumbai from Kerala, his ancestral state. He would arrive bright-eyed and smiling and declared, I am back and I mean business. Believe me, guys, this time I'm here to make money. Loads of it. How was it in Kerala, Jonathan? We would ask. And he would say, good. It is home turf after all. Home to the gods, if you like that kind of serenity. If you can take to it and vegetate. I say, how much thinking can a man do in paradise? Kerala spoils you. It reduces you to a nature junkie. Something about those coconut trees, those backwaters, those endless groves of dark green. The beauty overwhelms you, stuns you. You can't think, you get paralyzed. You don't want to work, at least not commercially. Everything that had to be created in the universe has been created there. It's there in the sun, the soil, the air, the water, the clouds, and the small little canals frozen in time. Kerala is the place you come to in order to die released from earthly bonds. but it is not big enough to hold me and my ideas. You guys know me, I'm a big picture man. I want beginnings, not endings. I want strife and struggle. I want chaos. I want to be challenged. I want to build and create. I need a platform and an audience. That's why, fuckers, I am back. So that's Jonathan for you. And,
I think that deserves more of applause, guys. I mean, that was all about where we are.
No. So the challenge here was, there were three very important challenges which I wanted to address as a writer. One is that since he was representative of a thinking, feeling generation, which was disillusioned by the corruption and intolerance of India, I had to be careful that I don't project my own angst onto him. So I had to delete huge sections of socio-political criticism.
Oh.
The second challenge was that when you create a larger-than-life character, he kind of takes over and runs away with the story. So I had to actually rein him and harness him and know when he had served his purpose. And the third challenge was I had to build him up through the eyes of his friends. So I had to work on the collective consciousness, the we. And so I had to decide how Jonathan would have interacted with each of his friends in his absence. Because he only arrives in the last chapter. And then he completely takes over the story. But before that, I had to kind of set the stage for him.
Okay, now this is pretty interesting. But then, yes, from Jonathan, are we moving to Roo or are we moving to Eliama?
I think one non-Malayali and then...
Yeah, okay, over to you, Indra.
So we come back to the roots, yeah. You think Jonathan could have hit upon any of your female characters? Okay.
100%.
You should know Eliama for that, I think.
Jonathan and Eliama would make a good couple.
I'm going to read right from the beginning, may as well. I have a memory of my grandmother showing me the strange flowers of a tree quite unlike anything I'd known to be real. We were standing in a garden, a cloak of chill mist thrown over it and embroidered in the gold of the dawn sun. The tree, or bush, was quite small, low to the ground. It looked like it was dying in an autumnal wilt, its thin, curling branches bare, except for desiccated brown seed pods that hung heavy in the hazy air. My grandmother gestured for me to come closer, to see how the trunk and branches were covered in a fine fur. In her soiled hand, unwrinkled by the later toll of time, she took one of the dried brown seed pods, or flowers or fruit, hanging above me, and gently lowered it so I could see. It wasn't a seed pod at all. With practiced care, she nudged open the curled, broad leaves, unwrapping it to reveal what was inside. The broad petals of the pod were the brown wings of a creature that fit gently in the pink cradle of my grandmother's palm like a bat. Its tail was the thin stem that connected it to the branches of the tree, and curled inside the embrace of its own wings was the contracted body of the beast. Its 6 limbs clutched to its torso in insectile fragility, its sharp and thorny head like a flower's pistil, the curled neck covered in dew-dusted mane of white fur, like the delicate filaments of a dandelion seed. The gems of its eyes were left to my imagination because they were closed in whatever deep sleep it was in. It's a dragon, I said, to encase the moment in the amber of reality. Yes, it is, said my grandmother with a proud smile. Whether this was pride at me or the little dragon whose papery brown wings she was touching, or both, I can't say. Here we call it the winged rose of Bengal. It was the most beautiful thing I'd seen in my life. I remember the immensity of the happiness I felt, looking at this flower-like fetus of a dragon growing off a tree tended to by my grandmother, knowing that dragons were actually real and grew on trees, wondering if people knew. I couldn't really believe it, which is why the memory became a dream. I convinced myself it wasn't a true memory because dragons don't exist. Why didn't I ask my grandmother about it later, my family? I did, of course, and they said, dragons aren't real, you had a dream. If the dragon tree was a real thing, and my family had the privilege of caring for such a marvel, why would they only show it to me once when I was young, just old enough to know about dragons from books and cartoons and movies and pirated VHS tapes? Dragons aren't real. I told myself I'd made them real in this dream because my father had written about dragons in his short career as an author. I was too young to read his novel, The Dragoner's Daughter, at the time, but he'd still read me a few passages. And because I'd read his time-yellowed copy of Tolkien's The Hobbit many times and imagined Smaug in the sky-stretched shadows of monsoon clouds. The dragons I saw hanging from those trees were nothing like what I had imagined, though. I know now that forgetting and remembering is a cycle I've relived many times, a snake eating its tail. Thank you.
Wow. Is this real, or is this magic, or is this something else? You've got to read the book to actually know it. I can say because I read it. And it takes you to a completely different world. Now let's come to you, the remnants of rebellion. Ponnu.
So, as I said, there are two timelines in this book. One is the 1960s, and it goes back even further, and that is the timeline of Isho. And the other timeline is that of his granddaughter, Eliama. So I'm going to read from Isho's timeline. It's about his baptism. For the most part, this is a very serious book. It can be very somber. It can be, it can be, it can feel like a heavy weight on your shoulders sometimes. But when I do readings, I like to read those fun parts. Because it actually, when I wrote those bits, I wrote some of those bits and I looked back and I said, where did that come from? I don't even know. Maybe I myself wanted a break from all the seriousness. So I'm going to read one of those. The day Isho was baptized, people from all corners had gathered at the church, eager to witness the festivities. Taragan had bedecked the church windows with fat strings of jasmine and arranged kappa, meen curry and payasam for everyone after the service. He had erected a large pandal in the church compound with benches and desks arranged in neat lines. Baby Isho giggled through the service even when Filippo Sechin poured a mug full of cold water on him as he sat in the shimmering new gold-plated baptismal font, inaugurating it with his naked fat baby buttocks. But what captured everyone's attention that day was the presence of doves on the church roof. They pointed at them as they descended from the sky while the baby was lowered into the font. It was a miracle indeed, just like the baptism of Jesus, they uttered. The ones visiting the parish for the first time did not know that the doves were perennial residents of Jerusalem Marthoma Church, and every so often they were keen to relieve their bowels on some unassuming Sunday morning worshipper. Plop would go the dove shit on the oiled heads and starched shutters of the unfortunate who would have to scurry mid-service to the bathroom to wash off the blessings from above. But Filippo Sechin didn't take any trouble to rectify the assumptions. He loved the effect the doves had on people that day. Mama Molekuti was more robust than what people had expected. She was 35 when she gave birth to her second son, Georgiguti. Taragan didn't promise a measure of rice or gold to the Marthoma Church this time, as he was certain he would have to honor the promise again, because he had very well realized his wife's verve by then. My gratitude is enough for God, he told a hopeful-looking Filippo Sechin when he took Georgiguti for baptism. Georgiguti was baptized in the same shimmering gold-plated font. It was, however, a different kind of day. The entire neighborhood had come to watch the festivities as expected. Georgiguti acted like a typical baby, wailing and trying to claw out Mama Molekuti's eyeballs throughout the humdrum service. When it was time to place him in the font, it was not the doves that decided to relieve their bowels. It was Georgiguti. Filippo Sechin's fine new white gown was not white anymore. The shit had flown everywhere. The shimmering gold-plated baptismal font was speckled with baby poop, and Filippo Sechin nearly dropped Georgiguti in shock. Taragan feared that he might now ask him to buy the land for the cemetery in return for this misfortune. They went through with the baptism anyway, and people still ate kappa, meen curry, and payasam.
Thank God there are no doves out here, only crows, and we are safe with the Ola right here. Well, again, I think, the excerpts that you've read is definitely going to get them to go to the bookstore after this. But let's come back to all three of you as successful writers today. But this would have started off at some point of time where you were grappling with writing and you didn't know. So can you share those anecdotes with us? Your first writing experience. Would you care to share it with us? I mean, are you confident enough to tell us how it was? Ponnu, yeah.
So my first writing experience?
Yeah.
Oh, I started writing in school like most people. So a couple of things. So I was a journalist, so writing was my bread and butter. So I was a print media journalist, and that's how I made money. But I'm so glad those stories are not archived, because I'm very embarrassed to read my old stories. But that's how I learned. That's how I learned to become a better writer. My editors just put me under the fire and they said, please, please write better. They would just, torch everything and say, no, this is not good enough. So that's how I became a better writer. But there are a couple of instances from school where that kind of ignited that spark for writing. So it was in 8th grade, so I did ICSE. So we had a language paper and a literature paper. So in language, obviously, you don't study. It's unseen passages, comprehension, story writing, antonyms, synonyms, all those things. So there was one passage, one question about story writing. And there was a theme. And I was like, wow, great. I'm going to start writing. So that's the first question I attempted. And I kept writing and writing. And I fell in love with the process. And I wrote maybe 1/4 the story. And that's all I wrote for the exam. I flunked royally. I got like 6.5 out of 25. And when I got the answer paper, I was so happy. Because probably, that's when I realized that there was something there that I cherished. So that was one of those things. And another incident was in my 12th standard. We had a story writing competition again. And we don't write our names because teachers shouldn't be biased. There shouldn't be favoritism. So we just I wrote a number. And I used to read a lot of sci-fi back then, teenagers. And then I wrote a sci-fi story. And then I don't do sci-fi right now, but I wrote one of those stories. And later on, when the teacher came to me, and I got the first prize, and the teacher came to me and said, as soon as I read the story, I knew it was you. That's when I perhaps recognized that there was something called style, and I didn't know what it was, and it took me years to discover that. So these small little instances, perhaps, bloomed in my head.
So you got carried away with story writing right from the 8th grade. Yeah. She just wrote and wrote and wrote. Yeah, over to you, Murzban, about your first experience.
So I've had a very monogamous relationship with writing. I think from the age of 7 or 8, I knew I wanted to belong to the world of books, and there was nothing else that really mattered to me. So I was editor of my school magazine, then I went on to becoming the editor of my college magazine, but that was still the non-serious part of my writing career. Because, you're in school, you're in college, no one else wants that job. So you do it, you end up writing half the issues yourself. And you have a lot of fun. I got pushed out of college for a year because I wrote something which the Jesuits' father didn't like. Actually, I didn't publish something which they wanted me to publish. So that further encouraged me that, yes, I also not only have the motivation to be a writer, but I also have perhaps the destiny of a writer, So, and then I joined advertising for a few years because I was very clear that I needed to bring home the bacon. But I was equally clear that at a certain age, I would get off the bandwagon and give up all that and write. So this is what I did when I was around 38. I decided to kind of pull back from my advertising practice and get into the serious nuts and bolts of writing. I wrote for 2 years. Like I said, I was not very happy with what I wrote. Then my travels to the villages of India, I came back, I started writing serious issue-based stuff. It started getting picked up. So there's an amusing story. So the first story I wrote, I sent it to a journal in New York called The Reading Room. And 2 stories I wrote. One was called The Usher's Tale, and the other was called Two Did Tango, One Did Die. It was about a friend of mine and I, who both, we drank a lot, we kind of rebelled a lot, and he was the one who paid a price for it. So it was that pathos, that kind of angst which I poured out into a story. Okay. And it got picked up by this journal in New York. And suddenly I panicked. I said, hey, wait a minute, who are you? What are your credentials? And they said, hello, we've got 3 Nobel Prize winners on our board. How dare you question our credentials? So that was kind of funny. And then I got published with them. And then I started following a trajectory of sending my work out to university journals. And I think that's where my non-serious part of writing started, because that is very competitive publishing. For every university journal that you make a submission, there are anywhere between 500 to 2,000 writers who send out their work. And I like this whole thing because a book takes a long time. It takes 3-4 years. So you need to publish interim to keep your motivation going. So I like the whole idea of being competitive about writing, about publishing, and seeing your work come into print, So so that's my love affair with writing. It continues. But as you know, we are now facing some serious challenges.
Yes,
so
we
should
be getting into that. Before that, Indra, I would like to listen to your bit as well, about your first...
So yeah, I also started writing as a kid in school. Literally, I would crib the language of the people I was reading and put it into my stories. I remember There was one point in time when I was obsessed with Jurassic Park, the novel and the movie, and I used to bring the book to school and read out the gory passages to my friends. And I remember writing a story in creative writing class about a bunch of people who go to a forest in China and discover dinosaurs, and it was total rip-off of language from Jurassic Park, like completely imprinted. And I remember my teacher said there was one line that said "gout of blood," and my teacher said that's wrong. That's not the meaning of gout. And I knew it was one of the correct meanings of gout because I had taken it from the book. I said, no, it absolutely is correct. And she refused to believe it, but to this day, I'm vindicated. But anyway, that's how it started, creative writing. But then when I was around 19, I wrote my first novel, which was, again, fantasy that was very derivative of what I was reading as a teenager, Lord of the Rings, The Wheel of Time, etc., and video games. I put everything in there. And obviously, it wasn't good. I was a teenager. So, but at the time, I was also writing short stories and putting them up on the internet. There were these amateur fan-run webzines, they were called at the time, or e-zines. And people would submit their work, and it would be kind of published on these websites. And the readers would give feedback, and it was kind of like a community kind of giving feedback on the stories, almost like a workshop. And so I would be publishing on these sites, and one of them had an ad for a publisher called Equilibrium Books, which was based in Australia. And the ad said that they were looking for young emerging writers, who had never been published before. So I was very excited, and I'll submit to them. And they replied to me and said, oh, this is great, we'll publish it, pay us this much money. And I was clueless at the time. I was a teenager. I had no idea about how publishing works. So I thought maybe this is normal. Maybe when you're starting out, you have to pay first. And sadly, I took it wasn't a lot of money, thankfully, but I took the money from my parents and published with what was essentially a vanity press. It was, and there's many of these that still exist. But this one was particularly predatory because they knew my age, they knew that I was a clueless kid, and they still, went ahead with it. And they were looking for young people who were unpublished, and they were taking money from them, which is terrible. But anyway, so I published this book, and even my parents didn't know anything about publishing. They also thought I had been published, like this was my first novel, and they were also excited. And it was terrible, obviously. No one bought it because it was literally a vanity press book. There was no marketing, nothing. I had 8 sales. All of them were family members. So basically, that was a milestone because it was a wake-up call for me. And from then on, I really did my research about how publishing works and how you go about publishing. And then I went to college and did creative writing classes. And that's when I really started feeling like, I could do this I really want to do this as a career. Because that whole episode, even as a kid, I wanted to be a writer. Absolutely, I imagined myself as a published writer all the time and would fantasize about it. But that episode kind of disabused me of those fantasies for a while, and I was like, I'll probably
Wake-up call.
Yeah, I'll probably just teach English or whatever, do English. But then when I did the creative writing classes and, started improving my writing and writing more and more and seeing other people's writing and, just having more of a comment. I like the internet stuff, but with people who are even more serious about writing and talking to writers who are our professors, etc. And, so that was when I really started and writing towards the career.
Check.
Thank you. So I wrote throughout college, and my first published novel was my MFA thesis, so it was taken from pieces that I'd written throughout college, and then I expanded it. And then it took another at least year and a half of revising, looking for an agent, etc. But I'd also been publishing short fiction. First time I published short fiction was in university also. 2010 was my first professional sale of a story. And it was about Kolkata underwater because of global warming. So that was kind of apt beginning to the 2010s, and now look where we are. I mean, heading towards that. But yeah, so writing has always been
in you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of metaphorical, Calcutta underwater, because writers always have to keep their head above water, right? They're always fighting.
I was just coming to that because right now we have this situation where, you were talking about research. For research for us, and many of us out here would be like just getting into generative AI, chat GPT, typing something and then getting stuff. But that is not what writing is about. So as writers, do you think that today's technology is affecting contemporary fiction? And if so, how?
So yeah, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead. So, of course, the first big challenge is what we are having is social media. And the fact is that, we are dealing with a medium which is essentially visual. And writing is essentially a two-dimensional experience. So then what is the third dimension? I think it's a writer's role today to bring a third dimension which competes with other more glittering forms of media like social media. And that is really the big challenge. But if you choose not to look at the social media exponent and say, okay, that's not my audience is the serious, erudite reader, I think there too we are facing a big challenge because, okay, let me give you an example. So just before I came to Kerala, I had a very close friend of mine called Gogi call me up. And now Gogi is a huge champion of books and reading, okay? So he's the kind of friend every writer should have. So if you bring out a book, he'll buy 20, 30 copies of your book, give them out as gifts, and through the year, he makes a resolution to give you a book as a gift. And just before coming, he confessed to me, saying that, Murs, you know what? I'm finding it a big struggle now to focus. And at one point, I used to kind of run through a whole book. Today, I have to grapple to read 4 pages, And I was really alarmed because I said, here is a voracious, erudite reader facing this situation. And I said, but why do you think it's happened? He's saying, because look at what life's throwing at me. So I started questioning that what is life throwing at people and especially at readers. So just look what is competing for our attention today. There is international news, there's national news, there are genocides, there are wars, there are scams, there are scandals. There is a strengthening and weakening of currencies, the rise and fall of markets, and there's food, fashion, culture. So we are constantly, so fiction is constantly facing a challenge from nonfiction, which is reality. So that is something we as fiction writers need to look at. That what is going to be the third dimension we are going to bring to the work? I think that's a question we should also throw open at some point and figure out not only for ourselves, but including for our readers, yeah.
Now that you have actually brought it up, have you figured out something, Have you even thought about it, the third dimension?
All the
because
time.
For me...
all the time.
And have you come upon or chanced upon something which you think will work?
So I think there are, yes, to my mind, I think there are certain, fiction needs to reinvent itself to a certain extent. And I think the truths lie in literature or in books that have survived. See, when you talk about a classic, let's not forget that a classic has survived the ravages of time. Okay, for example, Naipaul always raised the question that is the novel dead? That's historically this is a question which has been raised. And the fact is, as long as there are tragedies, conspiracies, and dichotomies in the world, books are going to be written and stories are going to express themselves. So I don't think the novel is dead, but it needs to be redefined. Interestingly, just a few days ago, Salman Rushdie, Ian McEwan, even and a few other writers got together to actually tell readers that please start reading again and how you should discover the joy of rereading, rediscover the joy of reading. And they suggested you start with a novella. So I think today the answer is fiction has to work a lot harder. It has to understand that you're on the reader's time. So you're asking for his time, his mental space, his understanding. So you have to deliver some compelling and liberating truths in the shortest possible time. So I'm not saying that you need a short story format, but definitely a compact novella. You definitely need to kind of have a hook which works in quicker, which kicks in earlier. And you need to probably write from a space where you either demystify a place or in particular era in a time, in time, yeah.
I think Ponnu has to add to it.
I think it's a little faint.
So, one more challenge for writers.
Yes, the challenge of technology. That is the
catching
problem.
Up with us.
So I'm just thinking out loud. I'm just thinking from the perspective of the writer. So I don't know if I will change the way I do my craft to suit the market or suit the reader at all. I'm going to do the writing the way I know it, the way I best understand it. It'll be raw, it'll be real. It might create problems, but I'm just going to stick to what I do. I don't know if I'm going to adapt and change to the market, because unfortunately there is a market, and I don't think about all those things while I'm writing. I just write because there is a story to tell.
No, absolutely
Yeah,
not. But
yeah.
I think what we need to do is, when we wear the editor's hat, at that point we need to go back and see that, make sure that the work is working in terms of character shading, pacing, So I think that is because it's like labor and management, right? Writing is hard labor, and then as editor you wear a hat and you do your own editing. You kind of
It's a skill. It's a skill that requires so many years of slogging away at the table, and we've done it. You've done it for a long time, But I just want to share one short incident that happened yesterday at the Lit Fest. This young influencer realizes that I'm a writer, and the first question he asks is, "Do you use ChatGPT to write?" And I was so offended by that, and I was
That's
stunned.
very offensive. That's
yeah,
very,
and he
very
says,
offensive.
I use it for writing dialogues, and I'm like, it's not just about the writing. It's about how your neuroplasticity comes down. It is going to affect the next generation. So there is a problem. It's looming large.
I want to jump on like the phrase you use, our writing is labor, and that is one of the reasons generative AI is so profoundly dangerous for the arts, because it is essentially a technology built to disenfranchise the labor of artists. It is stealing the labor of artists to algorithmically create a simulation, a synthetic imitation of art. It is not art. There's no human emotion. There's no intention behind it. It is a product, a synthetic product that is worthless, essentially. It is moving the labor of artists. The control of the labor of the artists is going to rich oligarchs who own this technology. And this if you use ChatGPT to write, you're essentially becoming a scab. You are betraying your fellow artists, because this technology is built on literally hundreds of years worth of artistic labor from human beings who wrote these books. And these books have all been like a trash compactor. They've been just shoved into this program, and now it just spits out garbage, and people think that they've written something. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
But if
not
you
art.
have original stories to tell, I don't think you need to worry about AI. As long as you have original stories.
But we do, because it's not about whether or not, because it's not contingent on quality whether or not people read books and whether or not people adopt a technology. Ultimately, it's a threat because these people have immense power. Like the people who own all these technologies, the leaders of the tech industry, they are billionaires. They're oligarchs. They have influence over governments. They have alliances with governments. They are fascist. This is a techno-fascist tool to take away the power of artists and put the means of production of the arts into the hands of oligarchs.
It's actually commodification of
Absolutely.
I really wish right now I had a time machine where I could stop time, because I see him, pointing at me and saying, I never expected we would have such a lovely time and we would go on back and forth. But I think the audience would like to ask a few questions. Oh my God, look at that. I just had to say it. They've been like, you're hogging the limelight, asking all the questions. Please, over to her.
4 minutes for the questions, so just one or two maybe.
Okay, thank you. So, as a second part to her question, so I'm also asking about the paradigm of technology. Where do you see yourself using technology in your work? Like when you say you set your story in the 90s or the early 2000s, it's easy, or it's not easy. It may be possible for you to draw a character or maybe write a story completely omitting the possibility of technology. But today, when you put it in the current scenario, it's not possible. You have to use it as a character or a tool or a plot or maybe as a canvas, right? So where do you find the balance, or how do you make peace with it?
No, I mean, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Okay, I'm going to do a one-up on technology. So I'm going to use technology to exploit technology in the sense that I'm going to mine social media for character types. So I'm going to study social media profiles of people posting, and then I'm going to caricaturize them. That's the only way I'm going to use technology. Okay, I don't plan to use it for labor, for craft, or even for my research, because I find it very inauthentic. It just collates stuff as of now. Okay, and it's great if I get interested and say I want to know something about Jung versus Eric Fromm, how they would approach a particular subject. Then I might use AI, but I'm definitely not going to use it for original works of art. Yeah, but I'm going to mine it for character types. That's what I'm going to do. Like how we look at building nameplates for names. Things like that. We writers are like cannibals here. So we should scavenge in that sense. Yeah,
I will add that you should not use AI for research either. It will give you the wrong information.
Absolutely.
In between
Yes.
do not use
Yes.
it for research.
It does.
It's
It's
absolutely
inauthentic. It's
disastrous.
totally inauthentic. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's infiltrated academia now.
Yeah.
You have literal journal papers that have been peer reviewed, and they have citations that don't exist because people have
Exactly.
used generative AI to create these papers, and they are literally citing books that do not exist. This is
Right.
absolutely disastrous
Absolutely.
for knowledge, for art, for everything.
Yes.
And it's not even to mention the ecological effects of this technology.
Exactly.
It is an enormous massively energy intensive. While we're in global warming. But to get to your question, you meant including technology in your art, right? How do you? So yeah, I mean that depends on when you said it, of course. But when you are writing contemporary fiction, it does become an issue because writing someone using a smartphone or social media is not a very compelling thing. There are people who can do it, who have done it. Like Tricia Lockwood wrote a book that I'm forgetting the title of, but it was beautiful. It was essentially, a lot of it was simulated social media. Like she was kind of writing a character, writing on social media, and how it all collapses when she faces this moment of grief. But yeah, fantastic. I think we're running out of time.
I think you could give her 30 seconds to ask. It's fine.
So I think you already spoke about it, about making it a novella. So are we actually looking at the end of the novel as we know it? Any of you can take it, because I think you did talk about the editing and focusing on novellas rather than novels.
I think we let Elizabeth weigh in on that, yeah?
Yeah, I'm just still I don't know. I can only talk from my perspective and what I'm going to do. I'm still going to write. Well, I'm not writing a novel next. I'm actually working on a collection of short stories because I wanted a break from the novel form as well, and a nonfiction. But I think novel is going to stay because we have stories to tell. Might be shorter, might be longer, but let's just keep our fingers crossed.
It's the vision of a thing that determines the form. It's not the other way around, Sometimes it's a sense of situation or a germ of an idea which determines whether you're using a novel or a novella or a short story, So...
Yes. Thank you so much. Actually, I think next time we should have a 2-hour session. We thought half an hour would do for us, but we ended up speaking so much, discussing so much. And thank you so much for letting us know that contemporary fiction is not unidirectional. It has so many other perspectives. Over to you, Asif, because I think now if I don't hand off the mic, I'm in trouble.
Yes.
Thank you so
guys.
much.
Thanks, Smrithi.
Thank you so much,
Thank
everyone,
you.
for the
Thank you.
wonderful and
guys.
engaging session.
Thank you very much.